All right, we are on page 442. This is 8-4. Just so you're aware, we are skipping example 1. If you are studying and you see anything about even and odd, we're not talking about that. Okay, so don't worry about studying that. Don't worry about even and odd functions or anything. You shouldn't see anything on any of the homeworks about it. I think I caught it all. Just as you're going back and studying for the test, don't worry about that. Okay. All right. So what we are looking at today is we're looking at a new way of representing our quadratic function. We've talked all along so far about ax squared plus bx plus c. And we're going to look at a different format now. This is going to be y is equal to a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Let's copy that down, and as we go through our lesson today, we'll figure out what all those things represent. And I think we're going to like this form a little bit better. A couple things are a little bit easier because of this, the way this is written. We got y equals a parentheses x minus h parentheses squared plus k. So an example of this, and we're going to start without anything here, without a plus k. So an example would be something like this. Okay, so that a, the h, the k, those are all numbers. Like I said, I'm going to stay away from k right now. I'm just going to leave it just like this to start, and then we'll talk about adding that k in. So we're right here, and we know if we needed to, we could FOIL this or use our shortcut and distribute and get back to that ax squared plus bx plus c. We don't need to. We're going to deal just from here. We're going to graph from here. We're going to talk about transformations from here. Everything right in this form. So using the information that you know already from the whole year of algebra so far, tell the person next to you what two transformations are occurring here.
Oh wait.
All right. Raise your hand and tell me one of them. What's one that we have here? Jacob? Good. Vertical stretch factor of 3. We've talked about that one already this chapter. All right. Jenna, what about the other one? Yeah. Remember, if it's inside the parentheses, it's horizontal. Okay. Inside the parentheses is horizontal. So this is a horizontal translation. And it's the opposite of what you see. Okay. Remember, we said if it shows -2, we're actually going to the right 2. Let's say horizontal translation to the right 2. And remember, when we're talking about transformations, we're comparing it to the parent function, which was just x squared. And that parent function was located right there. So if I am horizontally translating this to the right 2, what is my a of s going to be? What's my a of s going to be? Finn? 2. X is equal to 2. And I'm just shifting that over to the right 2. Okay, I'm shifting it over to the right 2. So one cool thing about this format is it basically gives us the a of s. We don't have to do that negative b over 2a. The a of s now, x is equal to whatever that h value is. Whatever that h value is, that is our a of s.
H is -2 in this situation.
H is a positive 2 because it's x minus 2. So the h is the 2. Right? So it's always the opposite of what you see, just like we did here, right? It's the opposite of what you see. Same thing here. If you see -2, x is 2. Right? So our A of S here, x is equal to 2. So that's definitely one thing to be careful of. It's got to be the opposite of what we see. There we go. Y is equal to 1/2, and then parentheses x plus 7 squared. So first next to you, what is the A of S for this? Our A of S, x is equal to -7. Right? The opposite of what you see in there. You see a +7, our A of S is a -7. So A of S, very easy to find. Right? We don't have to do the -b/2a, like I said. It's just right there for us. Now let's talk vertex. Let's talk vertex. If I know the A of S, all I gotta do is plug that back in, right? If I plug that 2 in, I'm gonna get 0. Because this is the number that I got or I used to find my A of S. When I plug that in here, the inside of that parentheses is always going to be 0. And 0 times anything is 0. So my vertex here is 2, 0. My vertex here, -7, 0. Yeah.
So if you had K there, would that give you your Y value?
Exactly. So once I have the plus or minus something at the end, okay, let's get a new equation here so we don't confuse anybody. So we got our new equation here. We know our A of S is going to be x is equal to -4. If I plug that -4 back in, that's going to make this 0, which makes this whole thing 0. I still have a -5 there. Okay, so my vertex here would be -4, -5. It's way easier, right? This right here, this form that we wrote down, this is called vertex form. Called vertex form. And it's called that because our vertex is right in it. Our vertex is h, k. That's our vertex. Okay. Okay, so our vertex is h, k. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple of these. Let's just make sure we can get our vertex out of it. Let's look at this one. Okay, I know it says to graph. I just want you, for the person next to you, I want you to talk about all the transformations that are happening, and I want you to write the vertex.
Something ready. Gonna plus them.
You guys have it. X love whatever that is has to equal 0.
All right, first, what is the vertex here? Raise your hand. What is our vertex for this? Caleb?
-2,
-2, 3. Okay, -2, 3. That's our vertex. Remember, it's the opposite of what you see here. It's exactly what you see here. Okay, -2, +3. Okay, there's our vertex. Now, what about our transformation? Give me one of them. Here, give me one. Aiden,
reflection over the x-axis.
reflection over the x-axis. AJ,
Vertical stretch.
vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Ben, left 2. Ethan,
Vertical translation left 3
if it's vertical, it's up or down, right?
on the outside.
Yeah, on the outside. If it's vertical, it means it's going up or down. Okay, so that +3, that's going up 3. Okay, so vertical translation up 3. Okay. All right, so we have 4 of them. We have 4 of them. Okay, make sure that we can identify all of those. Good. Now, we said that our vertex form, K is the Y value of the vertex form. Sometimes people get confused because they're used to, in the ax squared plus bx plus c, that constant is our y-intercept. This is not our y-intercept. Okay? This is not the y-intercept. I want you to write that down. This is not the y-intercept. Sometimes people see that plus something at the end and they think that's going to be the y-intercept. The 3 is not the y-intercept here. The 3 is in the vertex. All right, and we know it's not a y-intercept because this isn't 0. Y-intercept, this would have to be 0 for that to be the y-intercept. Okay, so we just have to be careful of that. That K value is not the y-intercept. Okay? They will ask us to graph. Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. Is how we're going to graph. Okay, so this is definitely much easier to find the A of S to find the vertex, right? Would you agree? Definitely much easier. Okay. The flip side of that is that it's harder to get that next point to graph. Okay. With previous graphing, it was harder to find that vertex, but once we did, we could easily find the y-intercept and just reflect it. Now the first part's easy. We get the vertex easy, but we got to work a little bit to find that other point. All right, so that's the trade-off that we see here. So, Ben, thank you. So if we're going to graph this one, and we're going to graph, this is the one that we're going to graph here. Okay, if we go to graph this, go ahead, create your graph. And if you haven't yet, please write that equation down so you have it in your notes so it makes sense when we start graphing and you look back at it. So create that graph, go ahead and plot that vertex that we know. Okay, so we've got that vertex. We know it's -2, 3. We know our A of S is at -2. So draw that dashed line down, right? Because we know that represents, that's the middle of that parabola. Everything on one side is going to be the same as the other. So that's the easier portion, right? We're gonna graph the vertex. After that, we need to find another point. It's not just going to be given to us. We need to find it. So the book is going to tell you to plug in 2 different values. I'm going to tell you to plug in 1. Okay. Let's get one other point on here by plugging a number in for x. That's all we have to do. It's not difficult. It just is longer than just looking at an equation, right? So we're going to plug in one number. Try to keep that number that you plug in close to the A of S. Okay? I don't want to plug in like a 3. If I plug in a 3, my number's gonna be way down there. It's gonna be tough to graph. All right, so I'm gonna plug in either a -1 or a 0, right? Try to stay maybe within 2 of the A of S. So I want you to go ahead and plug in either a 0 or a -1 in for x and solve it out. Let's see what we get for y. Feel free to let the calculator do all the work. Okay, I know I wrote it out probably quicker than whatever you did, but feel free to let the calculator do it. And we should, if you plug in a 0, we should get a -5 out. If you plugged in the -1, we should get a +1. Either one is fine. Okay, either one, you don't need both, just one of them. If I graph those, I'm going to graph both because I have both, but you have one, that's fine. I got this side of my parabola now. What do I have to do? I'm going to reflect it. And take those, that point, whatever point you had, I'm going to reflect it. This is two away here. I got this side. AJ?
How did you get the -1?
The -1 that I plugged in.
Oh,
I just plugged in that -1, so I know that's what I plugged in, right? And I got out the 1. That fit?
So, is that the one gonna ask you to graph them?
It is going to ask you to graph. And well, it's going to tell you to choose the right graph,
Do you
right?
want us to graph
I want you to actually graph at least one of them.
this one?
I'll let you choose, okay? But actually graph a good graph, because on the test, you're going to have to graph, right? So at least one actually graph, okay? I have one more type of problem to show you here. First of all, just real quick, while I get set up for that one, I'm going to put basic steps here. Plug in value for x and solve, 3, reflect. So these are very basic steps. Okay, if you want to add different words, more words, your own words, whatever, that's the process we just went through. Okay, so take a few seconds, write down the process we went through while I get this last type of problem set up. All right, so here's our last type of problem. And you see the instructions, you're going to do number 58. I'm showing you 57 to show you how to do it. Okay. It wants you to write the quadratic function in vertex form. So we want it in that form that we just had. But we want it to satisfy this information. So a reminder, even though I just erased it, this is the form we want. So we're going to plug in what we know. We know our vertex. So we know for sure that it's going to be x minus 1 and then a +2 at the end. We know that for sure just by the vertex. Really, the only other thing we need here, we need to figure out what A is. All right, we need to figure out that A value, and then we'll have the whole equation that we need. They don't give us the A value. They give us a point, 3, 10. What do you think we can do with that point, 3, 10? What could we do here? Jacob?
Well, I mean,
Well, if we plug in for x, we already know what the y is going to be, right? So, yeah, we're going to plug in the x and the y. Right? We can only solve for a variable. We can only solve for A if everything else is numbers. So if I take that 310 and just temporarily plug it in for X and Y, then I can solve for A. Okay, so this is for sure. This is what it's going to be for sure, right? But for now, to help me solve for that A, I'm gonna plug in the 10 for Y. I'm gonna plug in the 3 for X, and I'm gonna solve it. Okay, that's gonna get us that A value. And I'll just quickly solve it here. I know we're running a little low on time. Okay, that'll give me 4A plus 2 equals 10. You know, once we get there, as long as you do the parentheses correct, this is an easy two-step problem, right? We can solve this equation. We're gonna end up having A is equal to 2. Once we solve it out, that means back to my equation that I wanted, I plugged in that vertex, and now I know A is gonna be 2. So that's the equation that they're looking for. Plug in your vertex, plug in your X and Y, solve for A. All right, go ahead.